Airports are strange places. Thousands of lives rush past each other, never quite touching. But sometimes one small voice breaks through the noise and pulls strangers into the same story, whether they're ready or not. Lily's question sliced through the announcements and rolling suitcases before Sandra even realized her daughter had stepped away. 1 second, Lily's small hand was warm in hers. The next, Sandra was staring at the flight board, trying to quiet the worry that had followed her all the way to this terminal. Gate C-17. Seoul. New life, new contract, maybe finally enough money to stop counting every coin. She blinked at the glowing letters, telling herself to breathe when she heard it. That bright, serious little voice she knew better than her own. "Are you my dad?" The words hit Sandra's chest before her mind caught up. For a heartbeat she froze, as if her brain refused to translate what her ears had heard. Lily didn't ask about her father out loud. Never like that. Not in public, not in such a direct, naked way. Sandra spun around so fast her bag slipped from her shoulder and thudded against the floor. There, a few steps away, Lily stood in her pink hoodie and light blue backpack, chin tilted up, studying a man like she was trying to match him to a picture she'd never been allowed to see. The man had already crouched to her level, his dark hair falling forward as he leaned closer, eyes soft with surprise. Behind him, a tall Korean man in a sharp charcoal suit watched the scene without moving, like a quiet shadow that didn't belong in the warm chaos of family reunions and coffee lines. Sandra's breath died in her throat. Keanu. The name, once a whisper against her neck, slammed back into her like a wave. 7 years hadn't erased him, the jaw she used to trace with her thumb. The half-tired, half-tender way he held himself, as if the world's weight rested on his shoulders, but he still made space for everyone else. There were new things, too. A faint scar cutting through his beard at the chin, a stiffness in his posture when he shifted, like old injuries stitched under the shirt he wore. For a second she thought she was hallucinating from lack of sleep and too much airport coffee. The last time she had seen him, he'd been limping out of a dim alley, blood seeping through his shirt, whispering that he would fix everything, that the men he owed would be gone soon, that they could finally breathe. The next morning his number was disconnected. Then the silence grew into years. Now he was here, at gate C-17, in front of her daughter. Lily's gaze didn't flinch. "You look like how Mom sounds when she talks about him," she said, not loudly, but the words carried. She didn't even realize how cruelly honest she was being. She was just telling the truth the way only children could. Keanu's eyes flicked up, searching the crowd around them. For a moment they didn't see Sandra. They slid past hurried travelers and plastic seats, past the vending machines and the blur of bright airport advertisements. Then his gaze landed on her, and it was as if the whole terminal dropped into silence. "Sandra," he breathed, the word barely formed, more exhale than speech. Her body reacted before her mind did. She wanted to grab Lily, pull her close, and run in the opposite direction. Away from the man who had once held her future in his hands. Away from the clean, expensive lines of the Korean man's suit, from the cold way his eyes were now moving between Lily, Keanu, and her, as if calculating something. Sandra forced herself to stand straighter. Years of single motherhood, late rent, and quiet panic had carved a kind of steel into her. She pressed her shaking fingers to her carry-on handle and locked her jaw, trying to build a wall between her heart and the sight in front of her. "Mom," Lily called, finally noticing the fear on her mother's face. "I just asked him a question." Her voice wobbled at the edges, uncertain now. She looked back at Keanu. "I just wanted to know." Keanu's expression shifted, confusion, recognition, then something deeper cutting through him as he really saw Lily for the first time. The curve of her mouth, the way her eyes tilted at the corners, the tiny dimple that appeared in her left cheek when she frowned. Sandra had spent years praying no one else would see those familiar pieces. In this moment, she knew it was useless. The man in the charcoal suit took a small step closer, his polished shoes silent on the floor. His presence pressed against the air like a warning. A gold chain glinted at his throat, subtle but intentional. His face was calm, but there was a weight in his stillness that made Sandra's skin tighten. This was not someone who waited in economy lines or worried about hotel deposits. This was someone people owed things to. "Is there a problem?" he asked in smooth, accented English, his eyes never leaving Sandra's. The way he spoke made clear that he already knew the answer would matter. Keanu straightened slowly, placing a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder as if he were afraid she might break. His fingers trembled. For years, he had been a ghost in Sandra's memory. Now he stood between her daughter and a man who radiated quiet threat. Sandra's heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. She wanted to scream that, yes, there was a problem, that everything about this moment was wrong. She wanted to tell Lily to come back, to keep her away from this man who had once chosen danger over them. But the way Lily was looking up at Keanu, with the raw hope of a child who had built a father from stories and half-truths, pinned Sandra in place. Keanu met Sandra's eyes, and in them she saw terror, guilt, and something else that made her knees go weak. An old, unbroken tenderness that time and scars hadn't washed away. He opened his mouth, and the words that came out were not the ones she'd spent years rehearsing for him. "Sandra," he said hoarsely, "why does she have my mother's eyes?" The Korean man's gaze sharpened, and Lily's small fingers slipped into Keanu's hand, just as an overhead announcement called final boarding for their flight to Seoul. Lily's fingers tightened around Keanu's hand when the final boarding call echoed through the terminal. The world kept moving around them, families rushing, phones ringing, wheels scraping over tile. Yet for these four people, time narrowed to a single fragile moment. Sandra stepped forward and gently took Lily's other hand, pulling her closer to her side. She could smell the faint soap on her daughter's hair, feel the tiny tremor in her grip. Lily was brave, usually braver than a child should have to be, but this was different. This was the question that had lived in her chest since kindergarten, now standing in front of her with a real face. "We need to go," Sandra said, her voice low, steadying. "Our flight." "Is also our flight," the man in the charcoal suit interrupted calmly. His tone was polite, but it landed like a lock clicking into place. "We are all going to Seoul, aren't we, Keanu?" Keanu didn't look at him. His eyes were still on Sandra, searching her expression like he was trying to assemble 7 missing years from one look. "Mr. Han," Keanu said quietly, "can you give us a minute?" Mr. Han's lips curved without warmth. "You already had many minutes you did not pay for. Now everything is on the clock." His gaze slid to Lily, not unkind, but sharp. "And this new information changes the price." Sandra's stomach turned. She didn't fully understand the words, but she understood the power behind them. She had heard a voice like that before in different accents. Landlords, hospital desk clerks, the man at the pawn shop who examined her wedding ring and said it was worth less than she hoped. People who held something she needed and never let her forget it. She straightened. "Lily, come back here." Her voice came out firmer than she felt. "You shouldn't talk to strangers." Lily's eyes flickered between them. "But he's not a stranger," she whispered. "He knows Grandma's eyes." The sentence hit Sandra like a physical shove. Years of careful edits of "Daddy was complicated," and "someday I'll explain," shattered in one instant of child logic. Keanu swallowed hard. "Sandra," he said, "we need to talk, please, just 5 minutes." She wanted to say no, to lift her chin and walk away, board the plane, start the job, keep the life she had worked so painfully to build. But Lily was staring at him like a thirsty kid staring at a glass of water. Turning away now would tear something inside her daughter that might never fully heal. She looked at Mr. Han instead. "And him, is he part of this talk?" Mr. Han's dark eyes didn't flinch. "I do not like drama at my gate. There is a lounge 2 minutes from here. We speak there, or we speak later in Seoul. One way or another, Ms. Rivera, we are already in the same story." Her surname in his mouth made her skin crawl. "How do you know my name?" Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, guilt flashing across his face. "Because I told him," he admitted. "A long time ago, before I disappeared." The truth dug its claws into her. So he hadn't just left to protect her. He had carried her name into the same shadows he had promised to escape. "Mom," Lily's voice was small, "are we in trouble?" Sandra knelt, forcing herself to breathe, to choose calm even while her chest burned. "We're not in trouble," she said gently, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "We're just going to have a grown-up conversation, and I need you to stay close to me no matter what, okay?" Lily nodded, though confusion clouded her eyes. Mr. Hand gestured toward the distant glass wall where the VIP lounge waited, all soft chairs and warm lights behind frosted doors. "After you," he said, like a polite host welcoming them into a trap. As they walked, Keanu moved beside Sandra but kept a careful distance, as if afraid that if he got too close he'd fall apart. The air between them was thick with memories. Nights spent counting tips on the kitchen table, dreams scribbled on napkins, the last fight in a tiny apartment where the rent was late and the fear was louder than their love. "I never meant for you to see him," Sandra murmured without looking at him. "Not like this." "I never meant for you to see me," Keanu answered softly. "Not like this either." They reached the frosted glass doors, and a receptionist with a perfect smile immediately stepped back at the first glance from Mr. Han. Inside, the noise of the terminal faded to a distant hum. The air smelled of coffee and quiet money. Mr. Han chose a small corner area with low chairs and a view of the runway. No one was close enough to hear them clearly. No one was close enough to help. Sandra sat with Lily beside her, hand protectively on her daughter's back. Keanu remained standing, the posture of a man who didn't know if he had the right to sit. Mr. Han eased into a chair opposite them, crossing one leg over the other, every movement controlled. "So," he said in a measured tone, "this is the family you never mentioned, Keanu." The word family felt too bright for the shadows they were sitting in. Keanu's jaw tightened. "Because you made me choose," he replied quietly. "You remember." Mr. Han didn't deny it. "I remember a foolish young man who owed many dangerous people a lot of money. I remember paying his debt. And I remember asking if there was anyone who could be used against him. He said no." His gaze rested on Lily again. "He lied." Sandra's heart lurched. "Is that true?" she asked, each word heavy. Keanu met her eyes and didn't look away. "Yes," he said. "I lied to him to protect you, to protect her. It was the only good decision I made back then." Lily shifted slightly, leaning against Sandra. She watched Keanu with a complicated concentration, as if trying to understand a story with missing pages. Mr. Han studied them in silence for a moment. "Ms. Rivera, you received a job offer recently, did you not? A financial position in Seoul, very generous benefits, very sudden good fortune." Sandra felt cold spread up her spine. "Yes," she said slowly, "from K Global Logistics." "That is one of my companies," Mr. Han replied. "I needed someone good with numbers who could be trusted. Your file was impressive, single mother, no criminal record, excellent attention to detail." He tilted his head faintly. "And it turns out a connection to my favorite debtor." Sandra's throat tightened. It wasn't luck, it was a net. "So I was never chosen," she whispered. "I was brought." Keanu closed his hands into fists. "You can't drag them into this," he said, his voice finally rough. "I'll do whatever you want, I always have, but they stay out of it." Mr. Han considered him. "You are useful, Keanu, loyal when properly motivated, but you are also tired. Men like you think of escape when they are tired." His eyes softened in a strange, almost sad way. "Family makes such men much more careful about risk." There it was, not just leverage, insurance. Sandra felt anger surge up through the fear, hot and shaking. For years she had swallowed her rage, for late bills, for the jobs that vanished, for the empty side of the bed. Now it burned too fiercely to hide. "You will not use my daughter as insurance," she said, her voice low but unwavering. "I don't care what you think you own." Mr. Han watched her with the quiet curiosity of a man examining a rare object. "You have courage," he said. "I respect courage, but respect is not the same thing as permission." He leaned forward slightly. "Here is what will happen. You will still fly to Seoul. You will still take your position. You will still receive your generous salary. And you, Keanu, will complete one last job for me. Then we will discuss adjustments." "And if we say no?" Sandra asked. Mr. Han's answer was a small, almost regretful smile. "Then I start asking questions about a little girl who looks very much like a woman I once saw in a file on my employee's desk." His gaze turned to Lily, and his voice softened. "I do not hurt children, but not everyone I control has such rules." Lily, sensing the change in tone, if not the meaning, reached for Sandra's hand again. Her fingers were cold. Keanu took a step closer, his face pale under the lounge lights. "Please," he whispered, "don't do this." "I am not doing anything," Mr. Han said. "I am simply letting gravity work. The four of us are already on the same plane. The only question is whether we cooperate or fall." Out on the runway, a jet lifted into the cloudy sky, its engines roaring through the glass. Sandra watched it rise, wishing she could vanish into that sound, into that distance, into any future where her daughter wasn't sitting between a broken man and a quiet criminal. The lounge speakers chimed. "Final call for Flight 218 to Seoul. All remaining passengers, please proceed to Gate C-17. Mr. Han rose smoothly. "It seems the clock has chosen for us," he said. "Shall we?" Sandra looked at Lily, at Keanu, at the boarding pass trembling slightly in her own hand. The next step would decide all of their lives. And as she stood, heart pounding, Lily suddenly turned to Keanu with tears brightening her eyes and whispered the one question Sandra had spent 7 years trying to outrun. "If you're my dad," Lily asked, voice breaking, "are you going to leave us again?" Silence wrapped around the question like a closed fist. For a heartbeat, even the distant airport noise seemed to hold its breath. Keanu's face crumpled. This was the sentence he had earned, the wound he had carved with his own choices. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The lounge around them, soft carpets, warm lights, the quiet shuffle of wealthy travelers, turned suddenly into a stage where every mistake he'd made stood under a spotlight. Sandra's chest ached. She wanted to shield Lily from the answer, from the pain in Keanu's eyes, from this jagged reunion that was nothing like the soft fantasies her daughter whispered at bedtime. But Lily had asked, and some part of Sandra, the part that had survived everything, knew the truth had to start somewhere. Keanu dropped to one knee in front of Lily so he could look her in the eyes. His voice, when it finally came, was rough but steady. "I never should have left you," he said. "Not you, not your mom. I thought I was keeping you safe, but I didn't ask what you needed. I just decided that was wrong." He swallowed. "If I have any say in it, I will never leave you again, not ever." The words felt too big to fit in the small space between them. Lily searched his face, measuring sincerity in the only way a child could, instinct and hope. "Then why are you scared?" she asked quietly. He almost laughed, a broken sound. "Because I'm not a good man yet," he said. "I'm just trying to be better than I was yesterday, and right now I am very, very scared of the man behind me." Mr. Han checked his watch, not unkindly but impatient. "Touching," he said. "Truly, you can practice fatherhood on the plane. We are running out of time." Sandra stood, putting herself between Lily and Mr. Han without thinking. "She's not going anywhere with you." "She will be going with you," Mr. Han corrected calmly. "And you will be going with me. There is a difference." The decision Sandra had been postponing her whole life rose in front of her, demanding an answer. Stay small and safe, or stand up and risk everything. Only now, safety no longer existed. The job, the flight, the carefully planned move, every path led through this man. She looked at Keanu. "If we go to Seoul with him," she asked, her voice steady despite the fear, "can you keep her safe?" It was an unfair question, and they both knew it, but she needed to hear his answer. Keanu didn't pretend. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I have failed at that before, but I swear to you, Sandra, I will try until there is nothing left of me, and I will not lie to you again." There was something different in him now. Not the wild, reckless charm of the man she once loved, but a tired sincerity, a humility that comes only after you've run out of excuses. She recognized it because she carried the same exhaustion in her own bones. She exhaled slowly, years of anger and love tangled in her chest. "We board the plane," she said finally, each word heavy. "But listen to me, both of you." She looked from Keanu to Mr. Han. "You don't get to decide our whole story, not anymore." Mr. Han raised one eyebrow. "We will see." They left the lounge and walked toward the gate together, a strange procession. The quiet crime boss, the man who owed him his life, the woman who refused to bow, and the little girl holding all of their futures in her small hands. As they reached the boarding line, Lily tugged at Sandra's sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, "I don't want to be scared all the time. I just wanted to know who he was." Sandra knelt again, cupping her daughter's face. "You did nothing wrong," she said firmly. "You asked a brave question. Sometimes brave questions open doors we weren't ready for, but we walked through them together okay." Lily nodded, tears clinging to her lashes. On the jet bridge, the sound of engines grew louder. Keanu walked just behind them, every sense on high alert, as if expecting danger around every curve. Mr. Han moved with the calm of a man who was always exactly where he planned to be. Once seated in business class, another reminder of whose plane this truly was, Sandra buckled Lily in and took the window seat beside her. Keanu sat across the aisle where Mr. Han could see him easily. A flight attendant thanked them for flying, her voice cheerful and unaware of the storm quietly brewing between seats 3A and 3C. As the plane taxied, Sandra stared out at the runway lights sliding past. Leaving the ground had always meant freedom to her, a chance to reinvent, to start again. Now it felt like chains tightening with every meter they rolled. After takeoff, when the cabin lights dimmed and the city shrank below, Mr. Han loosened his tie slightly and leaned back. "Let us speak plainly," he said. "Keanu, in Seoul you will deliver one package and have one conversation for me. After that, we negotiate new terms. Ms. Rivera, you will begin work in my company as planned. You will manage accounts, move numbers from one place to another, nothing more. I do not ask you to carry guns, only spreadsheets." Sandra looked at him sharply. "You want me to help you hide money?" He smiled faintly. "I want you to help me organize it. You are good at untangling messes, I think." She thought of unpaid bills, emergency room forms, school applications filled out at midnight. He wasn't wrong. That was the problem. "And if I refuse once we land?" she asked. He shrugged lightly. "Then I find someone else to sit at your desk, but I will still know who you are, where you live, where your child goes to school." Lily, half dozing against Sandra's arm, didn't catch the words, but she felt the tension. "Mom," she murmured, "is he a bad guy?" The question hung between them. Sandra thought of all the nights she'd told Lily that real life wasn't like cartoons, that people weren't just heroes or villains. She thought of Keanu, who had been both in different chapters of her life. She answered honestly. "He's a powerful man who makes people do things they don't want to do," she said softly. "That's dangerous, but we are not helpless, Lily, remember that." Across the aisle, Keanu listened, shame hot in his chest. He had led this man into their lives. Now he had to find a way to lead them out. Hours later, while Lily finally slept with her head in Sandra's lap, and the cabin lights glowed faintly blue, Keanu unbuckled his belt and leaned forward. "There might be a way," he whispered, careful that Mr. Han, eyes closed 2 rows up, didn't hear. "It's risky, but I can end this." Sandra looked exhausted, but the fire in her eyes was still there. "How?" "I tell the truth to the only people more powerful than him in this space," Keanu said. "Security, law, I don't just disappear this time, I drag everything into the light. His roots, his partners, the debts, my part in it too." Sandra's breath caught. "You'll go to prison." "Maybe," he said. "Probably, but it would cut his reach. It would put you and Lily on a list of people to protect, not exploit." She stared at him, torn. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately. Part of her remembered the young man who always promised he had a plan, that everything would be fine right before it fell apart. "Why now?" she asked quietly. "Why not years ago?" "Because I didn't have anything left to lose back then," he said. "And I didn't care enough about who I was. It's different when your daughter looks you in the eyes and asks if you're going to leave again." He glanced at Lily's sleeping face. "I don't want her to grow up thinking men like me can't change. That mistakes are the end of the story." Sandra felt something shift inside her, a quiet click like a lock opening. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first step toward it. "Do you have proof?" she asked. "Names, accounts, anything they'd believe." He nodded slowly. "I've been keeping records, quietly, phone photos, backup drives. I thought maybe one day I'd use them to buy my way out. I never imagined I'd use them to put myself in." She looked down at her hands, calloused from years of work. She had built a life out of broken pieces before. Maybe she could build one more time, but this time on truth instead of fear. "What do you need from me?" she whispered. "Courage," he said, "the kind you've been practicing for 7 years." Her laugh came out half bitter, half relieved. "I'm tired of being brave," she admitted. "I know," Keanu answered. "Me too." They sat in silence for a moment, the engine's steady hum surrounding them. Then Sandra slowly nodded. "Okay," she said. "When we land, we go to security together. You tell them everything. I back you up with whatever they need. But listen to me, Keanu. If you run again, I will not protect you. I will only protect her." He met her gaze without flinching. "I'm done running." 2 rows up, eyes still seemingly closed, Mr. Hand's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on the armrest. He hadn't heard every word, but he had heard enough. Security, truth, ending this. And as the plane began its long descent towards Seoul, the quiet crime boss opened his eyes, already planning what he would do if loyalty finally broke. The seatbelt sign chimed on, and a voice announced their approach. Sandra took Lily's hand. Keanu braced himself, and somewhere behind his calm expression, Mr. Hand decided that if he could not control the story with fear, he would control it with one final, ruthless move. The moment the plane's wheels touched the runway, a shudder ran through the cabin that had nothing to do with turbulence. For Sandra, it felt like crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. For Keanu, it was the sound of a countdown beginning. For Mr. Han, it was the first note of a song he believed he still conducted. They moved through the airport in a slow, controlled stream of passengers. Signs in Korean and English flashed overhead. Lily clutched her small backpack, blinking sleep from her eyes as she took in the new country with a mixture of excitement and unease. "Is this where we live now?" she asked. Sandra squeezed her hand. "For a while," she answered. "But remember what I said, we decide who we are no matter where we are." At immigration, Mr. Hand slipped ahead, speaking quietly to an official he clearly knew. Stamps hit passports quickly, too quickly. His reach stretched even here. As they walked toward baggage claim, Keanu leaned closer to Sandra. "Security office is just past customs," he murmured. "Once we clear, I go straight there. You and Lily follow in a minute if something happens." "Don't say if," she cut in. "Say when we commit or we don't." He gave a small, unsteady smile. "When," he agreed. "When something happens, you keep her close and look for uniformed officers. Don't be polite. Yell if you have to. You're good at being loud when it matters." Her mind flashed to landlord arguments and hospital billing disputes. He wasn't wrong. They passed through customs, bags on the belt ahead. The hall opened into the arrival area, bright and busy, with families holding signs and taxi drivers calling out. The security office door stood to the left, a simple gray panel with a small sign that most travelers never noticed. Keanu shifted his bag onto his shoulder and took a breath. "This is it," he said. But before he could step away, 2 men in dark suits moved in front of them, blocking the path. Their faces were calm, their smiles thin. "Mr. Han requests your presence in his car first," one of them said in practiced English. "He insists." Sandra felt Lily press against her side. "We're not going with you," Sandra replied, louder than she meant to. Heads turned, nearby conversations paused, one of the men's smiles tightened. "The car is this way," he repeated, reaching toward Keanu's arm. Keanu pulled back. "No," he said clearly, "we're done." The second man's eyes hardened. "You think the police will believe you?" he asked quietly. "You think they will protect you from him? You do not understand this country." "Maybe he doesn't," Sandra said, her voice shaking but audible. "But I understand numbers, and if he's been laundering money through international banks, there are people above your boss who will care very much." The first man's hand twitched near his jacket, too close to be casual. Something cold passed through Sandra. This was the edge. One wrong move and fear could turn to violence. "Lily," she whispered without looking down, "do exactly what I say, right now." Her daughter's fingers dug into her coat. "Okay." In that instant, Sandra made a choice she never imagined she'd have to make. To trust the system that had failed her 100 small times and to trust the man who had broken her heart over the deadly comfort of doing nothing. She lifted her chin and shouted, her voice slicing through the terminal noise. "Officer, security, this man is threatening my child." The words rang out, clear and sharp. People turned. Phones lifted. A nearby uniformed officer's head snapped their way. One of Mr. Hand's men cursed under his breath. Keanu didn't hesitate. He stepped between the men and Sandra, raising his hands but not in surrender, in defense. "Stay back," he said, not aggressively, but firmly enough that the nearest suit paused. Mr. Hand appeared a few meters away, expression unreadable, as airport police converged. For a second, the crime boss and the woman he'd tried to recruit locked eyes across a sea of gawking travelers. She held his gaze. She did not look away. Two officers reached them first, hands on their radios. "What's happening here?" one demanded. Keanu turned to face them, voice loud enough to carry. "My name is Keanu Park," he announced. "I work for that man." He pointed directly at Mr. Han. "I have information about illegal trafficking and money movement through this airport. These men tried to prevent me from talking to you." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Camera phones rose higher. The officer's posture shifted instantly from irritated to alert. "Sir, step over here," the older officer said, gesturing toward the security office. "All of you." Mr. Han approached slowly, giving nothing away. "There seems to be a misunderstanding," he began, his tone smooth. "My employee is confused, he has." "I'm not confused," Keanu cut in. "I'm done being scared. I have names, dates, account numbers, and he knows I do." He looked at the officers, then at Sandra and Lily. "But I'll only talk if you separate us from his men and keep this woman and her child under your protection." For the first time, a crack appeared in Mr. Hand's calm. His eyes narrowed, weighing options. Violence here would be messy, visible, bad for business. Yet letting this slip from his control would be worse. He smiled faintly, but his gaze was colder now. "You disappoint me, Keanu," he said in Korean. "After everything." Keanu answered in the same language, quietly but without fear. "Then maybe you never really knew me." The officers moved fast then, training taking over. One escorted Sandra and Lily toward the gray security door. Another positioned himself between them and the suited men. A third approached Mr. Han with careful politeness. "We'll clear this up in the office, sir," he said. "Please cooperate." As Sandra stepped through the security doorway, she glanced back one last time. Mr. Han met her eyes. For a strange, flickering second, she saw something almost like respect there, a recognition of the line she had refused to cross. Inside the small, bright room, the air felt different. Not safe yet, but shifted. On one side of the table sat Sandra and Lily. On the other, Keanu, wrists resting openly on the metal surface. Around them, officers moved, radios buzzing, paperwork unfolding. For hours, Keanu talked. He named routes, shell companies, offshore accounts. He handed over his phone, his backup drive, passwords scribbled on a napkin. He did not try to paint himself as a victim. He told them what he had done clearly, without excuses. Sandra watched his shoulders slowly lower, as if each confession took a brick off his back. It hurt to hear how deep he had gone. It hurt more to see how much he wanted to climb out now. When it was over, an investigator turned to Sandra. "You can request protection status," he said. "There will be interviews, follow-up. It will not be easy, but we can help you start again, away from Mr. Hand's influence." Lily squeezed her hand under the table. "Start again," she repeated softly. "Again." Sandra looked at her daughter, at the fear and weariness and fierce little spark that still lived in her eyes. She thought of all the times she'd started over alone. This time, she wasn't alone, and she was done hiding. "Yes," she said, her voice tired but clear. "We'll start again, but this time we start with the truth." Later, when the formal questions paused and the room emptied for a moment, Keanu asked quietly, "Can I talk to her? Just for a minute?" Sandra hesitated, then nodded. "1 minute," she said, "and I stay." He moved his chair slightly closer to Lily's, careful not to crowd her. "I'm probably going to have to go away for a while," he told her gently, "to fix what I broke." "Prison," Lily asked, not afraid of the word, just wanting the real version. Maybe, he said, or something like it. People will decide what's fair, but wherever I am, I'll write, I'll call if they let me. I will not disappear again, not without a word, never again. She studied him like she had at the gate, but something in her had changed. She had seen him stand up to danger. She had seen him tell the truth when lying would have been easier. "Are you still my dad if you're there?" she asked. He blinked against the sting in his eyes. "Being your dad doesn't stop because I'm in a different place," he said. "It stops if I stop loving you, and I won't, not ever." Lily seemed to weigh that, then nodded slowly. She reached out and placed her small hand over his, right where the veins showed through the skin. "Then learn how to be a good one," she said simply. "We can start when you come back." Emotion hit him so hard he had to close his eyes for a second. "Deal," he whispered. Sandra watched them, her own heart pulled in 1,000 directions. She did not trust him completely. She did not know what the future would look like. But in this small room, with fluorescent lights humming overhead and the echo of his confession still in the air, she saw something she hadn't seen in years: the possibility of change. A knock at the door signaled the next step. More forms, more questions, the slow machinery of justice creaking to life. Their lives would not suddenly become easy. Money would still be tight. Fear would not vanish overnight. Healing would be slow and sometimes ugly. But they had chosen truth over fear, courage over quiet despair. They had refused to let a crime boss or a broken past decide their story's ending. As officers led Keanu away down a different hall, he turned back one last time. Sandra lifted her hand, a small, tentative gesture. Not quite forgiveness, not yet, but not rejection either. "We'll be okay," she said softly to Lily, more as a promise than a prediction. "How do you know?" Lily asked. "Because we just did the hardest thing," Sandra answered. "We told the truth when it was dangerous. After that, everything else is just the next right step." Lily leaned against her side, tired but somehow lighter. "Then let's keep taking them," she murmured. In another part of the airport, Mr. Han sat in a separate room, lawyers already on their way, influence stretching as far as it could. Maybe he would escape full consequences. Maybe he wouldn't. That part of the story would unfold over years and courtrooms and quiet deals. But one thing had already changed, something even he couldn't undo. The people he thought he owned had chosen to be brave together instead of afraid alone. And sometimes, in a world built on fear, that single act of shared courage is the first crack that brings the whole structure down.